Hello, everyone. I'm Lisa Simonian with the MART and NeoCon, and I'd like to welcome you to this discussion with the 2020 Designing a Better Chicago grant recipients. Today's discussion is a part of NeoConnect, a series of online resources, programming, and events from NeoCon, our exhibitors, and our partners designed to virtually connect the design community this summer through early fall. This year, NeoCon and the MART, in collaboration with the City of Chicago and the Design Museum of Chicago, launched Designing a Better Chicago. And as part of this new initiative, we are thrilled to be able to fund important and meaningful work through the Design Impact Grant Program. With that said, I'm going to hand it over to Lydia Ross to tell you more. Lydia is the Director of Public Art at the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events for the City of Chicago. Lydia?
Thank you, Lisa. Designing a Better Chicago shines a light on our city's extraordinary design legacy, the local talent, assets, and community that have long supported civic good through design. Our Design Impact Grant Program offers annual project-specific grants to individuals and organizations using design or design principles to directly address pressing issues in Chicago communities. This year, we were able to offer 2 grant awards, which you will learn about more today. Before I introduce Tanner, I want to take a moment to thank our advisory committee. We received more qualified applications than we were able to fund, which made their job extremely difficult. They invested a lot of time and energy with us, and for that, we are all grateful. Thank you, everyone. So I'm pleased now to hand the proverbial mic over to Tanner Woodford, who is the founder and executive director of the Design Museum of Chicago. As a designer, educator, and entrepreneur, he has taught, lectured, and led workshops on design issues, social change, and design history. He believes design has the capacity to fundamentally improve the human condition. Tanner, take it away. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lisa and Lydia. I'm so happy to be here. The Design Impact Grant Program has been such a bright spot for me and all of us at the Design Museum. It's nice to celebrate it today. So the Design Impact Grant Program is a key component of Designing a Better Chicago. As Lisa mentioned, this is a collaborative initiative organized and supported by NeoCon and the MART, the Chicago Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, and the Design Museum of Chicago. It's focused on highlighting and supporting Chicago's extraordinary design legacy and community. The Design Impact Grants are generously funded by NeoCon and the MART, and we're very grateful for that. So thank you to everybody, the attendees of this call, our grant winners, our applicants, our advisors. It's really been a community effort, and I'm feeling very grateful and excited. Today we have 2 2020 grant recipients on the line. Chicago Mobile Makers, which is a nonprofit that offers youth design thinking and problem solving workshops, and Maplewood Housing for the Visually Impaired, or Friedman Place, which is a nonprofit supportive living community for adults who are blind or visually impaired. This year, it's the first year, we also introduced a category, an honorable mention category, because we got so many amazing applications. And we wanted to highlight 7 folks that were really wonderful, but really good submissions. They are Boxville, Caroline Bellios, Ernest Earth with Mac Orjanowski, John Edel, Catherine Darnstead Latent Design and the Little Village Chamber of Commerce, Neighbor Space, and Norman Teague. So give a virtual round of applause to all these wonderful people. A little bit of housekeeping. We're going to do a Q&A in the last 15 minutes, so I'm sure you all have questions. If you do, please put them in the Q&A box. This program is being recorded, so if you miss anything, your internet cuts out, fear not. You can look for a follow-up link. And finally, you can learn more about this initiative at our website, designingabetterchicago.org. And I want to take just a minute here and thank Firebelly, who is an amazing partner in getting that website launched and thinking about the strategy behind this program. I know I already said this, but it truly has been a community effort. And for that, I'm very grateful. So with that, I am thrilled to introduce you to Maya Bird Murphy, who is founder of Chicago Mobile Makers. Chicago Mobile Makers was founded by Maya in 2017, it's turning 3. She grew up in Oak Park and was no stranger to Chicago's injustices and the built environment. When she went to architecture school, she quickly found out that she was one of the few people of color, and she would go on to graduate as the only African-American person in the class of about 80 students. Working in the field was no different than her experience in school. She started Chicago Mobile Makers to begin addressing these issues. So I've got a few photographs here of the Chicago Mobile Makerspace that I want to walk through. And I was wondering if you could help us with that, Maya, just sort of describe what we're seeing and tell us what this Mobile Makerspace is all about.
Sure, so what you're seeing right here, this actually hasn't been wrapped yet, but this is our exterior graphic wrap of our truck that we just bought, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later, I think. This is also the truck. We just finished doing the whole renovation of it, and it's now like a mobile studio, and that's another photo of it.
What are you writing there on the whiteboard?
Yeah, so this is a saying that I like to say a lot. It says, "This world will not be equal until it is built by and for all." And that's the mission of Chicago Mobile Makers. This is the interior. And I'll go through exactly what's going on here later, but we really wanted to make a really beautiful and supportive and warm, comfy space for people to work in.
And then just before we get into these images, I'm wondering if you could tell us more about the design education programs that you host more broadly. What do students do specifically? What do you hope they learn from interacting with you in the Mobile Makerspace?
Yeah, so we go around and do design thinking and problem solving workshops. So I have an architecture background, but we always try to keep it very broad. So design thinking, problem solving. On the left is a program at Marwin that we had last summer. And you can see they're doing collages, and we call this the Healthy Community Collage. And so what they're doing is actually going through the entire design process. And then they actually get to design and propose what their neighborhood change would be. We usually find a site around,
oh, cool.
around Marwin. The one on the right is a shorter workshop that we do with younger kids, and they're actually replicating a Chicago landmark. So this is on the IIT campus, what they're working on there. So he drew and researched everything about the building and then made a model of that, like a model that replicated that building.
How do you, so you work with Marwin, who else are you working with, and how do you make those connections?
It's actually been lovely recently because STEM has been, a huge topic around Chicago and in education. So we have worked with Schurz High School recently, Bell School. We've actually done pop-up programming with the Chicago Architecture Biennial. So we're kind of everywhere. And the partnerships have been made just because STEM is so important educationally right now. So it's been, very easy, luckily.
So take us a step back now that we've seen the images and kind of understand what the truck is and how you're using that. But why did you start Chicago Mobile Makers, and what was the impetus, and what have you learned over the last few years?
Yeah, so I think that you said a lot in my intro, but I'll kind of reiterate what you said. I grew up in Oak Park where, Frank Lloyd Wright is a huge deal. Architecture is always talked about. So I didn't need to go anywhere or go out of my way to know what architecture was. And then when I decided to go to Ball State, I realized that I was going to be surrounded by white people the entire time. And it was kind of culture shock going from this very diverse community to Muncie, Indiana. And I also started realizing that there's urban decay. There was a lot of urban decay in Muncie. And then coming back, I realized that there's a lot of urban decay in Chicago. So I decided to continue my architecture career by going to my master's, my grad school, which was Boston Architectural College. And we got to do a thesis. And so that was the first time I really got to sit down and think through everything that I had experienced and I was feeling. We had an entire year to do a thesis. So I actually did all the research and development for Chicago mobile makers in that thesis process. So what I asked then was, how can we diversify the design fields and how can we improve disinvested communities, and like, can we do that at the same time? So that's how Chicago Mobile Makers came about.
Is it, and I don't mean anything by this, but is it working? Or like, what are you learning as you're doing this? It seems like you're still early in the process too of getting the truck put together, but I know you've also been in the community without the truck. And I'm just curious, like, I've seen you're very active. I see you often on social media doing things that just continuously blow my mind, but what are you learning, and how's this process working out?
Yeah, I think that the short-term goals are just to engage students and show them something new, because we're usually going into classrooms like during the middle of the day. So this might be their math class, and then instead of math, they're gonna do this design project. And I think that makes a huge difference just in their day, where they're doing something completely different than they've probably ever done. And they're learning new skills, which I think design is something that you see it more in schools, but not all the time. So that's our short-term goal. And then I think we know that if it's working later, years later, and we know if it's working if we have people going into the design fields and actually showing real interest in design, construction, digital fabrication. That's how we know that.
That makes a lot of sense. It's a long payoff.
Yeah.
Are you working? So you're working primarily with kids at this point, or are you doing any adult education?
All kids. So it's like age 8 to 18 right now.
Okay.
Big range.
So this next question, I think it kind of gets to this really well, which is, you're working with the next generation and of civically minded and responsible designers, architects, makers, doers. Maybe they don't know that they're those things yet, but I like that they have, I think it's interesting that they have this mentor that's helping them realize that and understand the power of what they can do. What message do you have for these kids? What do you say to them? And also, why is it important that you're working with them now as opposed to later in their development?
Yeah, so I think, again, like the short-term goal, not all of these kids are going to become architects or designers, or, they might become nurses, and that's fine. That's not really the point. The point is that they can really think about making change in their own communities, however that is. And if they come and learn a skill here, they might be able to pass that skill on, or use that skill in a different way than we thought they would use. But in a much bigger way, it's really important because injustice in the built environment is quite dangerous. And it's going to affect Chicago for a really, really long time. So we need to start building up diverse groups of designers and makers and decision makers in our cities. And then, and if we don't, then, built injustice is never going to be improved. So it's actually very, very important. And I think Chicago Mobile Makers is just one of the grassroots efforts. And I think there are a lot of them that are going to make a difference together. It's going to take a large effort, definitely.
I fully believe that. Is the current moment and some of the unrest that we're going through, rightfully so, how is that affecting your mission or changing the way that you're thinking about things, or is it making it more necessary? I'm just curious how that's affecting things.
I think that it hasn't changed anything. It's obviously changing operations, daily operations, of course. But I think that it kind of validates the mission that we need to continue these grassroots efforts, and we also need to continue pressuring people at the top. So I think it's this dual thing where we need to continue grassroots efforts that are, making small, tiny changes in different places, but then we also need policy change, and law changes at the top.
Absolutely. I want to take a minute here just to remind everybody, I'm sure you have better questions than I do, so please do think of them and put them in the Q&A, and we'll address those both with Maya and Kathy at the end of the talk here. You mentioned your mission. I was wondering if could you tell us what your mission is in just a couple of words, and how does this Design Impact Grant help further that work?
Yeah, well, our mission is to, I think, both make a more diverse design field in general, but then it's also just to show and empower kids to know that they have really the power to make real change in their communities. The immediate impact of the grant is that it will allow us to grow, and it just helped us finish our truck build out. And so we're going to be able to reach more youth through that. And it will hopefully be a catalyst for more grant funding, because we're so young. It's been, really tough so far, but hopefully in the long run, it will help us, show kids that they can stay in Chicago when they're adults, and they can really come back to their own communities and better their communities. I think if you would really quickly go back to the pictures. And
yeah, of course.
Kind of describe the truck more in detail.
Let me start at the top here.
Yeah, so a year ago, we bought this USPS truck. It's a retired USPS van.
Can I interrupt? Where did you find it? It's so cool.
Yeah, that was actually, funnily, probably the easiest part of this whole process. There's a place in Joliet that they retire them to this lot, and they just sell them. So we brought this home, and then started the kind of long process of trying to fundraise for it and starting the construction process. So this is what it's going to look like soon. We're getting it wrapped in early July. If you go to the next one. So the purpose of the Mobile Makerspace is that we're breaking down as many barriers to design education as possible. So this van comes to your neighborhood and parks, and you have literally all you need to learn how to design or make something. So we have the back door. We completely replaced it. Used to be a big lift door. And so now it's a magnetic whiteboard. You can go to the next one. And we have desk space and storage space for all the tools. And then the coolest thing is that this thing powers itself. So we have outlets. We have solar panels on the roof. And so this will run any tool you need. So you don't need to have any access to power once you're parked. So it could be in the middle of a parking lot or in an empty lot, and the truck is all you need. And continue. Were you going to say something?
I was just going to ask, and kids are coming into the truck to use the power, or are they outside? You're facilitating around it? Yeah,
so we designed it so it's really easy for you to pull tools off. And so I'm getting this foldable sawhorse that we can set up tables outside. And then you can use extension cords or whatever you need. We're going to have a lot of battery powered tools.
Cool.
So it's very easy to just bring what you need off the truck.
That's cool. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit more about specifically what projects kids are doing. I mean, you did tell me a little bit about these. Walk me through kind of a project when you're talking about students identifying problems and solving problems in their communities. Is this, are you going through a design thinking exercise? Are you more interested in sort of, form and function and trying to figure out how to make things that make products that make life better? How are you looking at design, and how are you using design to empower these kids specifically? Yeah,
so the truck was finished 2 weeks ago, so it's very new.
So cool.
We plan to do more construction and digital fabrication stuff with the truck, because that's what it is going to allow us to do. These classroom workshops are more about design thinking and trying to identify a problem. So with the Marwin one, Marwin is right by Cabrini Green. So we took the students out, and these kids were middle schoolers and high schoolers, and most of them didn't know what Cabrini Green even was, and they were shocked to know that it was, the whole thing was obviously terrible by the end. And they were shocked to learn all of this. So we do a little bit of history. We do mapping, so they really got to understand the area. And what they're looking for is what the neighborhood doesn't have and what it needs. And so what would positively affect the neighborhood. So they're actually designing, in this case, it was a building, but you know, I think that the construction and digital fab workshops that we do, we can branch out to products or, you know, a solution that's not just a building.
And are you bringing in partners to teach as well? I know that you're qualified to have a background in design, but are you working with others in that way too?
Yeah, the plan is to have a few part-time people to, you know, teach what their expertise is. So I have a general knowledge of all of this stuff, but I know that someone can much more efficiently, you know, do a 3D printing class. So the hope is to have a bunch of different offerings for classes, and that will help once later when we have like kind of a hub where it's a lot bigger, we can actually have larger class sizes. I hope to be, you know, doing like 3 workshops a week or something that all have different topics. People can kind of take like 3D printing 101 and then do the next level of the class, and then you actually learn an entire skill. So that's
cool. Yeah, I really, one of the things I really love about this project is just when I'm working through different workshops at the Design Museum, we're often thinking about access, and we'll meet kids from all across the city in different places, and they always come with this sort of inherent intelligence about their neighborhoods, about the things that they're working on, but they just don't have access to tools. They just don't have access to people like you to help frame questions, to help them think about sort of their neighborhoods and their communities and the way that people interact with one another. And often just handing a kid a tool, it never ceases to amaze me how quickly they pick it up and do something inventive that I never even imagined, you know. And a big part of that is not so much you know, a big part of that for me has always been just seeing them access some kind of a tool that they hadn't used before. I love that you're bringing these tools to them. You're not taking them out of their community into a different place to learn how to use something. You're inherently lowering this bar where they feel comfortable, they feel like they're in their space, and they are in their space, and then they can focus on sort of problem solving and some of these bigger issues that you're helping them identify. So I really love this project. And I think it's going to have a massive impact. So I just want to share a lot of kudos to you for that. My last question for you is, I think, a big one, and I think you've addressed it actually quite a lot so far. But how can we design a more equitable Chicago?
Yeah, I think I have a pretty short answer for that. That's concise, but like, design is everywhere around us, and even if you don't realize it is. And I don't believe that we'll see any equity until we have people of all backgrounds making design decisions on every scale.
Ditto. I'm behind you on that. Because that was such a short answer, I'm going to ask you one other question. Pie in the sky, you've got endless budget, you've got endless resources. What do? Is it 25 more trucks? Is it a building someplace? Where does this project head in let's say 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, in my mind, I would love to have multiple trucks and then have this hub. I mentioned the hub before, where, you know, we can really have community gathering space at this hub, and that's where all the trucks park. But it's more a bigger building where we can, you know, we're not limited. The truck is limiting. It's really cool, but it's definitely limiting. So having an actual permanent space will help us have as many workshops as we want and all the tools that we need. And so that's the grand plan.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing. We're going to switch over to talk to Kathy now from Friedman Place, and we'll pull you back in 15 minutes or so. for Q&A. So just another reminder, I'm going to be annoying about this. Think about questions, drop them in the Q&A box, and we will come back to them. I've got a lot of questions, but I really want to hear all of your questions as well. So with that, I am very excited now to introduce you all to Cathy Gregg. She is Chief Development Officer of Friedman Place. Friedman Place is located on the far north side of Chicago, and it's a residence serving adults who are blind or visually impaired. The building boasts 81 private studio or one-bedroom apartments, offering adults who are blind or visually impaired privacy in a safe and home-like setting. Welcome, Cathy.
Thank you.
Sort of like I did with Maya, I'd love to just run through these photos and have you talk about what's going on in them. Can we start at the top here?
Yeah, first, I'd love to say thank you to Designing a Better Chicago for the grant, and it's really going to help further our mission, and NeoConnect and the MART and everyone involved in making these decisions. I think it's an awesome initiative. So
thank you for applying and being so wonderful.
Oh, that's easy. No, what we see here is a gentleman in the middle of 4 of our residents who was doing a research project on how technology, or people who are blind and visually impaired access technology, actually like how they were pushing the buttons, how they used it, what made sense to them, and actually visually, like just studying their actions to see how he could improve upon that. He was a communications and technology graduate student at Northwestern, and we tend to get a lot of people from Northwestern, and they know us, and they'll come in and do a lot of observations on things that they're trying to do to improve access to technology and the technology that people will actually use when they're visually impaired. So, and they were awarded Echo Dots.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. So this is part of our effort to give residents autonomy and do things for themselves. So a lot of our residents are still using Braille, even though it is a dying language. The gentleman in the check shirt is a Brailler repairman, and he was giving them a hands-on lesson on how they can easily fix their own Brailler, and they're quite expensive, and repairs are expensive. So he came in and volunteered his time and told them how to get things going. And the lady in the black with the white hair, she is a certified a certified vision rehabilitation therapist, and she also helped design a lot of the things that help our residents be as independent as possible when they're moving about the building, and also helping them achieve their goals towards independence. We have goal setting every year for the residents, and they decide what they want to try to accomplish, and we help them get there.
That's great. I did have one quick question while you're talking about Braille.
Yeah.
I realized it this morning. What is the Braille in the logo? Is it an F and a P?
That's an F and a P.
Okay. Just a simple question, but yeah. I was curious about that.
Okay, so here we have a Braille poetry display. And in the very left side of that picture, there's a gentleman in a gray sweatshirt, and that little QR code and the red panel is access through your phone. If you hover over that, the poem will be read to you. Then it's also in Braille, and or let's see, there's 2 forms of Braille. So it's a larger print Braille, and then a smaller print Braille, and then QR. And that's for accessibility. And then also, while we have you, since we're talking about design, you'll see on the floor, I'm going to be talking about bump strips. That at the very right-hand side in the middle, there is a pale gray strip or beige strip, and when the residents are sweeping, when they hit that strip, they know they're in the middle of that lobby, and they need to turn left to get to the elevators. So that's how they, and the different textures in the tile and in the carpet also instruct them as to where they are in the building.
I love that. It's such a simple solution.
It's very simple. Yeah, and you can't trip over it, because trust me, I'm there all the time. I don't trip.
A silly question. If Braille is a dying language, what's it being replaced with? Is it just spoken audio?
It's technologies on the computer. It's JAWS and Zoom text. So JAWS is a computer language that reads the internet and reads text for anyone, and that's why like accessibility and in design and even in communications, to ensure that like the picture you have in front of you would say in alt text behind the picture, a JAWS reader would read that there are 3 gentlemen standing in this picture. They are touching a Braille poetry exhibit. And so the more information that's back there makes those pictures visual or to be seen by people that can't actually see.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what's this? What's going on here?
Okay, so here the lady with the flowers on the left is she's one of our sweet ladies that gets flowers from her family quite often, and after they found
she
out
looks very happy.
Yeah, it was her birthday and she couldn't come home, so they sent flowers, and so she had to lower her mask to smell them, but that's okay. And on the right, we have a large weaving studio, which I didn't give you a picture of, but that's okay. This is another resident who adored weaving. She has since moved on to a higher level of care. But we call this walking the warp because residents will weave fabrics and they turn into, they're sewn by charitable sewers into products that people can buy, like bags or placemats or napkins or dish towels. And she wove this. It took her about 6 months, and then we hold it up in the hallway, our longest hallway, and then she goes from the beginning to the end to feel how much fabric she's made because she really can't see it. So again, the residents really like this when they can actually, I did this. And again, you'll see another bump marker there that indicates where our mailroom is. So.
And for the record,
I was going to say, and there's hand railings too. Hand railings help with directionality.
Oh yeah, I see that now. I was going to say, for the record, she also looks very happy.
She's so happy.
So tell me, we started to talk about this a little bit with the bump rails, but how does Friedman Place design its spaces to promote both independence, self-determination, that sort of thing of its residents, and who makes these decisions on site? Or are they on site, I guess?
Yeah, they're all on site. So the first biggest change was when we moved from more of a dormitory-like setting with fewer people to Friedman Place with the privacy of their apartments. So if you can imagine living with someone, and they were at least living with people that were also not sighted, so they were mindful, but we have residents that come from nursing homes that have 1, 2, 3 roommates that have vision, and they leave stuff around. So falling, bumping into things is something that is very distressing, very anxiety making in our residents. And so this, having their own place with their own bathroom, their own kitchenette, they come with their own things, they can set them up how they like. That's something that is very unusual for a lot of people. So that's one aspect. Then when we set those goals and we have the nurses and social workers and therapists working with the residents, when there seems to be a commonality of a problem, that's when those experts work to devise maybe a new system or a little tweak to what we have in place that provides something that automatically would be accepted by a lot of people, and thereby increasing their independence. Something as simple as, let's say, putting a rubber band around the salt shaker so that when they don't have to say, where's the salt? I mean, simple little things like that, and inexpensive. And so that's what we're good at. Or, and so that comes from just a lot of very careful observation of CNAs and nurses. And then the bigger things like bump strips, adding those in was something that our executive director, Alexander Brown, and Rita Scaletta, who are our COO, would decide and implement those new changes, or anything that would be something that would be a larger physical adjustment to the building. But everything that we do, like self-determination, just means having control over your life, basically. And so, we all want that. And so whatever we can do that increases their autonomy, their freedom, their ability, is the guiding factor behind everything. And you know, sometimes people come in and they don't want to have that freedom as much, or they want people to do things for them. And you know, we really work hard to encourage them to get a sense of that they can do things.
And that sense of having a community around you that sort of, I think in some ways that gives you freedom too, right? If you have a lot of other people taking care of things that you don't need to do yourself, then it frees you up to do the things that you want to do, perhaps. So it does feel like there's a sense of freedom running through this whole the thread here. You've listed all kinds of people here: nurses, social workers, therapists, executive directors. It takes a community. How many folks work at Freedom Place?
We have 70 different people, maybe 35 full-time equivalents. We have everybody takes communal meals. Well, not now; they're taking them in their rooms with COVID. But, you know, we have servers that help them. They're all trained to, and we all get trained to really not do for people. And it's really hard sometimes, you know, to just say, you know, it's right there in front of you, or servers, I mean, and say things kindly, of course, but servers will instruct the residents to, the food is on their plate. Let's say your bread is at 3 o'clock, your pasta is at noon. You know, there's a language that we all use that is familiar to the residents, and again, it's really important for them to be, and that's part of our mission, part of our license with the state, is to have people be as independent as possible.
Interesting. I see some questions coming into the Q&A. Let's keep that up. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let's hear them. We'll address those here in about 10 minutes or so. For you, Kathy, one main element behind design and modifications to the building are basically about being able to do things without guidance. This is what we're talking about here. And I think you've given us a few, but I really love these simple designed examples you're giving, and I want to hear more. Can you give us any other examples of non-visual markers? Like, describe how residents use some of these other features. And
sure.
And
well,
yeah.
So our elevators talk, and they say that, you know, if it's the right or the left elevator, what floor they're on, because that's something too. Like, you know, blind people who are blind are just like us. They get lost in their thoughts. They're wandering around. They think they know something, and then they don't. And so that's what these cues really like. Do you ever have, what do we call it? Driver's hypnosis, where you're like, oh wow, I'm here already. You know, like if you passed all of the scenery, all your landmarkers or whatever, and that happens too. So basically, everything is set up sort of as a safety net to get them to find their directionality, their orientation. So some things are like those handrails. They are on, you know, if you follow the rules of the road, and if you're facing one way, that handrail should be on your right-hand side all the time. So if it's on your left side, you know, you're going down the hallway the wrong way, that sort of thing. So that's simple. And since the railings are very prevalent, the underside of them are used other things, like hand sanitizer is really important. So if you feel like you need to get your hand sanitized, there's a little Velcro piece underneath the handrail, and right above it is the hand sanitizer, so you don't have to be feeling around so much. Same thing with our elevator buttons. There's a little piece of Velcro right under the handrail, so they can get the button for themselves, and they're not asking people, where's the button? Can you push the button? Other little things for people. So diabetes is really common for people who have blindness, and therefore they have neuropathy, and sometimes they can't feel the button. So we'll use like bump markers to say, well, this one's always going to be where the bump dot is. It's always 1, the little one, and the bigger one will be on 4 or something like that. There's just little strategies we use. The flooring, differences in tile. Smooth tile leads you down one hall. Rough tile leads you to another hall. When you're trying to get to our mailroom, for example, and we've talked about this one, where you have 85 people in a building and they all want to know when the mails come. So the poor receptionist is getting inundated with, is the mail here yet? Rather than them going to open up. So like, I think it was Rita who developed this one, and it was maybe it was Tony, our social worker, I don't know. But they put a sound machine in there on crickets, which is a really pleasing that question be asked over and over, they can go down the hallway and hear crickets chirping and go get their mail. And then there was some time in between, is the mail here to, are the crickets on? But that is all gone now. So we got everybody used to finding out for themselves if the mail's in, which is doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're living in a small community, people can get a little cranky about the mail.
I get cranky about the mail, so I can understand that. So I'm hearing you're activating senses of touch, of hearing. Are you activating any of the other 5 senses?
Well, we have sound, other sound markers. We have a fountain in the back, so they know they're in the back area. And of course, food is a smell. So when it's smelling really good, everybody's really downstairs waiting. They know they don't have to look at the clock or ask their talking watch what time it is. They know. But I think the 2 main other senses used by our residents, and I think blind people in general, are touch, and touch from head to toe. So it's, the feeling at the end of a white cane, the difference in textures, and how when they sweep the cane in front of them, that is like their eyes. So that's a sense of touch that is an extension of themselves. Sound, tapping the white cane on the ground to see not only if it goes down deep, if there's a pothole, which Chicago's famous for, or if they're going to trip over a crack in the sidewalk, but are they getting near the end of the sidewalk? Have they just hit the curb? Things like that. And then sound, we use sound quite a bit to help them determine where they are in space and time, and they do too. They find some people. I think we have one staff member who can echolocate like a bat with, makes sounds and listens to them, how they bounce off the wall or wherever they are.
That is a superpower right there.
That is a superpower. Yeah.
You put a note in our shared document here that I just wanted to read. You said, if there is a motto or tagline for our weaving studio, it would be, with our hands we see. Touch of all kinds, from the top of the head to the soles of the feet, guide a person with no or low vision. And that's a really interesting way to think about being a sighted person as well. I have another question I want to pivot to, but
go ahead.
You can feel free to react to that. I don't mean to cut you off.
Well, it is, and it stemmed from our weaving studio because people can't imagine that people who are blind would do something as intricate as weaving a piece of fabric that could be 2 feet wide and having to go in and out and back and forth. But that's a fingertip, that's a touch thing, and it's something that is really relaxing. And it is also an exercise. It's a workout of the mind and the body, and that makes people very relaxed. And so that stemmed from the weaving studio, but it really is everywhere. Whether they're walking down the hallway or hang on 1 second, the dog just got in here.
Perfect.
Sorry.
It happens. That's part of our new world. Yeah.
It is. To having any kind of sitting down, seeing across from them it's finding where your plate is and just using the, it's really almost eloquent to see our residents dining, because they touch with their hands so lightly as to not soil themselves, but to find things, find where, and it's just what they do. And it's really different. And that is how they see and how they find things, find their way.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
I asked Maya about designing a more equitable Chicago, and I want to ask you how we can design a more inclusive Chicago.
That's such a good question. I love that question. So the first thing is, what anybody can do is, when you see a blind person and they're coming your way, just say hello, because they may not know you're there. And they startle, then people get startled, and it's just friendlier too. And so whenever we pass so we work in their home, and when we pass them, it's really, it's impolite to not say you're there and say hello. So that's one thing, and it's just, I think that's friendly, and that would make, I think, everybody feel better.
It's easy.
And it's easy, but there are definitely a lot of different things. Like one you know, that QR code that I pointed out at the beginning, that is the basis of a product that I'm not going to pitch, but it's really cool. It's called NaviLens, and they have it implemented in Cartagena, Spain. And it's a series of QR codes that actually like lead someone to where they want to go. And it's other than like when you have a regular QR code, you kind of have to be close to it and hover. It's a QR code with a beacon. So if you're walking down the platform of the L or something, it would say Chicago Red Line, and which way it's going and what the stops are and the time it's running. And it can really actually be like someone taking you by the hand and leading you wherever you want to go. It can tell you anything that you want to put on it and anything that anybody else wants to know, like, is there a bathroom in this restaurant? How do you get there? Is my doctor on this floor or that floor? It can tell you all, and then it's really for what it might cost a major city in Chicago, it's like pennies per person. It's just not that expensive, and it would be inclusive and useful to other people too, because you can really load up. Just imagine you can't put a zillion things on a sign, but you can on a QR code. So
yeah, cool.
Also, my biggest pet peeve is the lack of streetlights that have the beeping sounds, and that would really help people get where they want to go safely without having to rely on anybody else. And Chicago's very busy, traffic-y city. That would be really great. And I don't know if anybody's developed this yet. I haven't really looked it up. But you know how you can tell if in cars now if you're getting close to hitting someone else's bumper? That type of technology, so that a person standing at a corner could know really how close a car is, like if they're getting closer, that would be really helpful to help blind people get across the street safely.
Yeah.
So
I actually,
like
I have one really quick question that I want to transition into the Q&A. I don't think we actually clarified what the grant is for Friedman Place.
Well, and this is good because we're going to be posting an RFP on our website today. We're going to be making a video and some college level classroom materials for design students of all kinds, and it will highlight the features of our building, how the residents use them. It could pose questions to people that are in design. You know, to challenge them to think about ways buildings can inform someone who can't see the elements. And so that's what we're hoping to accomplish with our video. And we're going to be creating also like a deck or something, you know, a multimedia platformed, shareable college level course material.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
People can come in and visit us when we're not in the middle of this pandemic too, to see how it all works.
I can't wait for that. So I'm going to transition into our Q&A now, and I'll tell you all that we have more questions than we can answer. So we'll put up contact information at the end of this presentation, and you're welcome to reach out to any of us directly if we can answer any of those questions. But to start us off here, Lydia actually had a really wonderful idea of asking Kathy to ask a question for Maya and asking Maya to ask a question of Kathy. So I have both of those, and I'm happy to read those on your behalf. That might be easier. So Kathy's question to you, Maya, is what has been your greatest challenge as an agent of change, and how have your challenges informed what you hope to impart to your students?
Yeah, that was a great question. I had to think about it a little bit. I think that my biggest challenge so far has been coming out of a very established, field, which is architecture. So I have a bachelor's and master's in architecture, and there's a path that they give you that's very strict, and it's not even talked about straying from that. You just do that one path. And so I think that was my biggest challenge, is kind of breaking from that. And I actually still work part-time at an architecture firm, but I do Chicago Mobile Makers the other half of my time. And so that, I also had to work full-time for a long time while running Chicago Mobile Makers, which was a lot. I just couldn't do it anymore. So I think that's the hardest challenge, and I hope from my what I went through, trying to finally get to a place of balance, I guess, in my life where, you know, I'm still doing what I want to do, but I'm also still, you know, mostly paying bills. I hope that students see that they can create their own paths, I guess, through this life, and that doesn't have to be through architecture, but I want to show that if you work really hard, that you might be able to kind of create your own path through a very established field.
I think with you as your mentor, they will definitely get there. Kathy, Maya wants to know, you have a history of social impact and nonprofit work. When and how did your dedication to public interest begin, public interest work?
Well, I think it actually, because I graduated in the go-go 80s and was in the financial industries and making money like crazy and just, you know, I don't know. I was kind of a jerk. And, you know, like it just was focused on that. Then I had kids and again, I was still not, I was a good mom, but I didn't think about them when I was at work, and I hated that. I just hated that. So I changed my path. I stayed at home, began volunteering like crazy in the community, found always, I was sent to the Ways and Means Committee of everything that I did, and because I never had didn't have trouble asking for money. So then I went back to school, and I always wanted to be a writer. And so now I've combined my ability to ask for money with writing and write grants and tell stories. And so that's why, and I wanted to do good. I wanted to do something for people with what I could say about what someone else was doing. So that's kind of it.
You're in the right place to do good as well. That's great. you got there.
Not a jerk anymore.
So I'll go through a couple of these questions here. The first one is from Maya. How are you currently, or do you potentially plan in the future to engage mentors from Chicago's AEC community to connect with the 8 to 18-year-olds that you're trying to influence? And are there any organizations that will help you do this? And I'm actually not sure what AEC means, if you could help me with that too.
Yeah, architecture, engineering, construction. So I'll give an example of what we have started to do. We actually just launched this thing called Formwork Youth Studio, which is in collaboration with Perkins and Welland, Leopardo. And this was a really exciting thing because those are really huge firms. So what we're going to be doing is a 4-session workshop with high schoolers, ages like 13 to 18, where they actually get to go into Perkins and Will's office and do the workshops that we do in that space. So that's a very cool way that the AEC community has kind of stepped in to support.
That's great. Next question is for Kathy, and it's from Beth Voigt. Kathy said that Braille is a dying language, primarily being replaced by technology like JAWS. However, it seems like most of these replacements are audio-based. What about folks who have hearing issues or simply prefer not to have what they're reading be broadcast to the world?
Yes, that's a really good question. And we actually have the one gentleman who, in the first picture, is deafblind. And he has this device, and a lot of it is technology based. He has a machine that if you speak into the microphone, this gentleman here on the blue.
On the very far right?
Yeah, he doesn't have it now. Oh no, I think it's on his hip. And it is a machine that if someone's speaking to him, he will receive Braille into his fingertips. So it'll take text and translate it into Braille that he reads. But it's a wonderful language. We're doing our best to preserve it. We have a Braille loom, and we do encourage it. It's just that youth of today just find that the technology is so easy that it really is opening up a lot of doors. But it's the only language that can be read completely in the dark, Braille. So
that's very interesting. That's true.
It's true.
Trying to think through other languages, but no, I think you're right.
No.
question for Maya. Is there a Mobile Makers student design project that really stands out to you, like a specific one? Was exceptionally creative or interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about one that a project that we just did at Schurz High School, but I would say, like, I'm kind of always floored by, like, especially high school kids, how much they really know about their communities already, and they always shock me with their design proposals. But I would say one that we did recently was at Schurz High School, and if you know about the Six Corners intersection, which is like Milwaukee, Cicero, Irving Park, it's been really contested about what to do on each corner, and that's where the Sears used to be, and that closed, and then that like really drove out all of the other big business around there. So there's literally a hole, like a gaping hole where a building used to be that was demolished, and then they never built anything. So we went into the Schurz classroom and talked to the kids about what they would propose. It was more of an urban planning view. And I think that the proposals are always really realistic and really straight to the point, and they really just address the problem. So one group said that they would put like a health center. There was a grocery store because there aren't that many, there's not that much access to healthy food around there. So I would say they're all really great. And I love how practical and to the point they are.
That's great. I want to squeeze in 2 more questions. We have 4 minutes, so I've got to go fast here. This one's a little bit longer. It's for you, Kathy. How does Friedman Place share their design solutions and programs with other organizations? Is there a community of organizations like Friedman Place who work together? Is there any interest from places that aren't directly related to visual impairment in implementing these designs because they're useful solutions for all people? So like curb cuts, which are probably the most famous example of this type of accessible design that is ubiquitous.
That's a lot.
Yeah. We're going to end this with a challenge.
Okay, and so yes, there isn't a form. There are a lot of, like, there's the National Foundation for Blindness. There's a lot of organizations that are big overviews of this, but where there are so few residences for blind people, and I believe we're the largest one in the country. And so we let people come in and glean from whatever they're going to glean, and have access to residents that the residents want to help. So that's why we're designing this video. There just aren't that many places that have design elements for the visually impaired in them. And so we're going to have this video ready. You can set, when it's ready, we'll share it anywhere. We hope to change the mindset of the next generation of people, or even people now that have influence in this world. And so we'll be reaching out. But I don't know if I answered everything.
No, you did great. That was a big question. Okay. And I do just want to acknowledge that there's a shared thread between the both of you, and you're both trying to influence the next generation, and I think that's really exciting. The last question, so here real quick, I'll put up contact information because we're not going to get through all of the questions. So feel free to reach out to any of us. If you want to reach out to me, that first email address, grants@designchicago.org, starts with me. So I'm happy to answer questions. And we've got Maya and Kathy's information up here. If you want to learn anything else about Designing a Better Chicago, we've got the website's launched and live and beautiful, and it's designingabetterchicago.org. So check us out. This is the beginning of a lot more. We're just getting started, and I think I know we have the ability to make a really big impact. So thanks for coming. The question I want to end on is a really tactical, practical one, which is, are there any volunteer opportunities at Friedman Place or Chicago Mobile Makers?
Yes.
Tell us how to sign up for them. We're getting lost.
Okay. Well, on our website, we have a volunteer tab section. So you can simply go to our website, www.friedmanplace.org, hit volunteers, fill out the form. There's plenty.
How about you, Maya?
So COVID-19 has kind of put a halt on things.
Yes.
So
saying.
We will have plenty of volunteer opportunities in the future. So if you're interested, just email me.
Awesome. So with that, I have a lot of people to thank. NeoCon and the Mart, thank you for all your support. City of Chicago and DCASE, Lydia, and all of your colleagues. We always love working with you. I want to thank my colleagues at the Design Museum who have invested a whole lot of hours on this project. Friedman Place and Chicago Mobile Makers, I want to thank both of you and all of our applicants. It was such a hard decision to make. I know Lydia said that, but I want to echo it. I want to thank our advisors. I want to thank you for coming and listening today. I've got a full heart, and it's because of all of you. So thank you so much. Please check out designingabetterchicago.org, and that's that. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.